Why is biodiversity threatened? We're going to talk about something that we'll call local factors, as opposed to more global human effects. But before we go into some of those, we really need to talk about the fact that the human population is growing fast. In 2014, the estimate was just over 7 billion people on Earth. Human population growth is exponential. The more people you have, the more reproduction you have going on. If you have more reproduction happening, then the curve on a graph of population versus time is going to get steeper and steeper and steeper, to the point where we're looking at about 9 billion people by the year 2050. It was Thomas Malthus in 1798 who came up with the concept of carrying capacity. Basically, he said that the Earth can't indefinitely support an ever-increasing human population. That's a concept that to us, I think, seems quite clear, but Malthus was a member of a social force at that time. Basically, the clergy that felt the Earth was put here for humans to use and upon which we should go forth and multiply. But Malthus was among the first in recognizing that there was no way that human population could increase indefinitely without having some sort of an effect on the environment and the environment's ability to support us. The logic he used led him to the fact that based on the kind of farming he saw around him at the time, there would soon be so many people there wouldn't be enough to eat. Basically, the planet was going to check population growth through famine. He had seen famine. He knew what it was like. So the planet was going to take care of it if we didn't. In other words, we would exceed the planet's carrying capacity for human beings. The question arose, what actually is the carrying capacity of planet Earth for humans? The answer is like most scientific replies, it depends. We haven't hit the Malthusian limit yet because of a very important thing, and that's human technology, the ability to come up with answers to problems that are facing us at almost every turn. In this case, the answers came through science and technology that increased food production. This made it possible for us to get back on the exponential population growth curve and escape Malthus's view of what the upper limits were. In fact, there are some estimates that suggest if we all did with less and lived at the lowest possible level for existence, Earth could support an estimated 40 billion people. But even if we were able to reach a carrying capacity of 40 billion, it would require sacrifices for all humans on Earth, some more than others. It raises a huge question about the quality of life, which points out what's increasingly becoming the single most important fact about human population growth on Earth today, that the world's wealthiest 16% of the people on Earth use 80% of the available resources. The bottom line here, as I say, is that it's complicated. We recognize that the human population is growing. We recognize that resource utilization is much higher in some countries than in others. But what I really want to do is circle back to our primary objective and examine what this really means for biodiversity. If you asked anyone, they'd say it's pretty clear that human population growth and resource utilization have huge effects not just on our social and economic well-being, but of course, on biodiversity. But how exactly? It translates into decreases in species richness. It's primarily through the loss of species richness that our greatest population growth effects are going to show up. If we simplify it, it's as fundamental as no two things can occupy the same place at the same time. That's what we're talking about. If a human is living in a given place, fewer native plants and animals can live there. The details of how human population growth actually affects species richness are only now starting to be worked out. We don't have a lot of data yet. It's a huge, complex problem. One of the pioneering papers on this was published in 2003 by McKee and colleagues. They measured a number of factors in 114 different countries, and what they discovered was that out of all the factors that they looked at, human population growth and species richness were tightly linked. In other words, if you were to slow population growth, that might be sufficient to stop drops in species richness. They suggested that all you need to know is population size. Plug this into the equation and you can figure out in a given place what effect it's going to have on biodiversity. calculations show that the number of threatened species in an average nation is going to increase 7% by 2020 and 14% by 2050 just based on population growth alone. That's a very simple relationship, but if you open up that box represented by the idea of population growth and unpack what it means, you're talking about lots of human-induced drops in biodiversity. And as usual, things get complicated. I'd say that there are 7 major human-mediated causes of biodiversity loss. They can be grouped into 2 main categories: localized ones and global ones. The global causes we'll look at in separate videos, but for the localized ones, we're going to list 4: land use change, pollution, resource exploitation, and introduction of exotic species. Of course, they overlap a little, but I think for the most part, these are good ways of unpacking our box of problems. Let's start with land use changes. These include things like habitat destruction and conversion of natural habitat to human use that isn't necessarily compatible with the organisms that are native there. This includes crop monoculture that results in a very dramatic drop in species richness in a given habitat. When people think about habitat destruction and conversion, they think of slash-and-burn agriculture, destroying rainforests, plowing over stuff, or removing the tops of mountains to get at resources like coal. But there are ocean use changes, too, that I think we should not ignore. Think of coastal wetland loss and mangrove destruction. Urbanization is an enormous change in land use. More people need more homes and more places to work. That in turn requires an expansion of agricultural resources and the spread of those into environments that were previously untouched. It's a very complex problem, as I say, but simply put, the more people you have, the less natural, undeveloped habitat there's going to be. And it's very easy to see how that's linked to a drop in biodiversity. The second local factor is pollution. A lot had been done to bring this subject to people's attention to the point where we think about it as enormous disasters attached to Superfund cleanup sites and such. But there are other, more subtle ways of polluting the environment which I think are worth thinking about when we talk about drops in biodiversity. For example, the degradation of local habitats through human activities that cause downstream effects, things like the leaching of harmful chemicals from mines into the water table. Waterborne pollutants can pop out in very unusual places and have really big downstream effects, if you'll excuse the pun, on the reproductive viability of organisms that happen to be in those places. There are also dead zones in the ocean caused by nitrogen fertilizers that wash into rivers. Where the rivers flow into the sea, the nitrogen causes blooms of bacteria which in turn use up the oxygen. Anything that tries to be active in an area where the oxygen is being used up by the bacteria, any oxygen-requiring organism, that is pretty much any animal, for example, is going to have a really hard time of it. These dead zones are now starting to be a little bit better understood, and it's pretty clear that they're growing in size and in number in relation to population growth. Then there's the overall problem of waste disposal. Untreated sewage is a classic problem for biodiversity. It's not just, of course, human waste. It has to do with sometimes bizarre chemistry involved in the high-tech stuff that we're making now. We're talking about chemical compounds, including drugs and PCBs. There are lots of strange molecules that humans are producing and dumping. In some cases, you get these hormone mimics, simple compounds derived from prescription drugs and other man-made chemicals that get flushed into waterways. Hormone mimics act like naturally occurring hormones that control normal development in wild organisms, particularly water-living ones. Hormone mimics can also adversely affect their reproductive organs, and there are many, many, many examples of this kind of pollution, one that people wouldn't necessarily think of. Another one that doesn't immediately occur to people is noise pollution. Birds in cities are reacting to noise levels. So even the organisms that are not being wiped out because of our expanding cities are starting to adapt to an urban environment by changing their behavior and reproductive patterns. And some of them just can't do it. Noise can also be a major factor in marine mammal survival. Evidence suggests that sonar pollution interferes with the health of marine mammals. Patterns of reproduction can also be upset by our introduction of light pollution to places where there wasn't light before. Sea turtle hatchlings can be impacted by artificial light heading toward it instead of the ocean when they hatch out of their nests on the beach. And bird strikes on buildings are greatly increased at night when the lights are left on. Let's look at the third local factor, resource exploitation. This gets to the simple idea that humans are always using things from their environment. We are inextricably linked to that environment, and we use up stuff. We always have. We have to do that in order to stay alive. There are classic ways we use resources like hunting, cutting down forests for firewood and lumber. Where does the biodiversity go then? A big one for me as a marine scientist, of course, is fishing. We talk about the harvest of fish, but it's not really a gathering of what one sows, it's really a straight-up removal of a resource, as much as mining is. There are attempts to control overfishing, but to a large extent we often don't have enough data to know just what a sustainable amount of extraction is until it's too late. Before we were moved to action, for example, the cod fishery had collapsed on the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. Today we have no idea what the long-term effect of huge trawls scraping over the sea bottom will be. Now countries are pushing to fish more in the Antarctic, which is a problem because fish, like most things there, grow slowly in the cold Antarctic depths. The last local cause of reduction in species richness I want to mention is the introduction of exotic species, and we'll talk about those in the next video. So just to bring it all back to this concept of carrying capacity, the emerging message is that if everyone on Earth can manage to do more with less, especially in places where we presently use up relatively so much more, we might be on track towards a more manageable carrying capacity for humans on Earth with a decent quality of life. In our world of finite resources, it's a balancing act between humans and every other species on Earth. And we have to learn to do more with less to keep that natural balance, the natural species richness, the biodiversity that keeps ecosystems and therefore all of nature, including ourselves, healthy.
A recent documentary, Under the Dome, depicts how Chinese residents are forced to cope with the worsening air quality. In the film, the director says that last year Beijing had 175 polluted days. This is when the smog is so bad that schools are closed and planes are grounded. So just how bad is pollution in China? Well, according to the EU air quality standards, less than 1% of China's population breathes clean air daily. Chinese residents are subject to 40 times the number of microscopic irritants found in smog than is recommended by the World Health Organization. In fact, the former Chinese health minister has attributed the high rates of lung cancer in China to this toxic smog. He also said that pollution was killing as many as 500,000 residents every year, a figure supported by World Bank estimates. In the past, Chinese officials have been unwilling to fully acknowledge the scope and impact of the pollution problem. Although an internal report by China's environmental agency also supported these figures, Chinese officials banned its publication in an effort to avoid social unrest. Part of the reason for China's poor air quality is a long-standing lack of industrial pollution standards, a problem China only began tackling in the early 80s. China's toxic air comes from vehicle emissions, industrial waste, and China's coal usage, which exceeds that of the rest of the world combined. However, in recent years, China has aggressively pushed to lower levels of pollution by banning high-polluting vehicles and curbing its industrial coal usage. Unfortunately, a study from the International Journal of Global Energy Issues has predicted that since China is still an industrial powerhouse, their priority for economic growth will be higher than for lowering emissions. Without significant change, pollution days will likely continue in the years to come. You've probably heard that China holds a significant portion of the United States debt. To learn just how much of America China owns, check out our video right here. Or go check out our new show, All Points Project, where we explore untold stories from around the world. Thank you for watching TestTube. We appreciate your support and hope you consider subscribing for all our new videos.
fishing. Cyanide fishermen obtain powdered cyanide and bottle it up. They dive deep into aquatic exotic areas and spray it around to spray and to stun and capture the fish in massive quantities. Some of these fish die by the poisoning. Some are abandoned and eaten by predators. But the vast majority of the fish are brought into fisheries to be either sold to aquariums, a business that earns over $200 million a year from Europe and North America, or be sold to restaurants with $1 billion annually in China to be slaughtered.
Cyanide is fast, as in Holland, dangerous chemical can be found in many forms. It is colorless, odorless, and is able to transfuse through air ingestion and contact. It is well known as the method of suicide. When one possesses scientific intelligence during military extrusions in cost, they may use it. Though many may not know, it is used widely in Southeast Asia and in the form of destruction fishing.
Tell me what you know! No! Is that a Tic Tac? Oh no!
He's dead, Jim.
Cyanide fishing and other forms of destructive fishing are primarily practiced in the Philippines and various parts of tropical Asia and Indonesia, even though it is outlawed almost everywhere, much like whaling. Blast fishing is similar to cyanide fishing because it is used to affect multiple fish in a small area, stunning them briefly or killing them en masse. Both destroy the environment and both destroy the fish. Obviously, this form of fishing is cheating and morally frowned upon.
Coral reefs. A coral reef is where most of cyanide fishing takes place. The damage to the reef ranges from coral bleaching to coral death, which utterly destroys the habitat, not just for food or aquarium fish, but for every other species who calls the coral their home.
Cyanide, being potentially lethal, also kills many of the fish it was intended to stun. Many do fall unconscious, but the rest may die or suffer from some of the symptoms that occur when exposed to larger amounts of cyanide. If cyanide is able to kill humans, it is certainly able to kill fish as well. There have been countless reports of fish developing diseases such as cancer and dying shortly after their purchasing. Though some are caught for aquariums, many are slain for food, which is most definitely bad for their health.
Fish are gathered en masse, stunned by the cyanide, and are brought to live aquariums, where their ecosystem is dramatically altered, and the world they left could be suffering without a possible vital link in the food chain. Otherwise, not so lucky, if you can even call the aquarium fish lucky, are killed. The freshness of the fish are served in Asia is renowned, and it's all because of aquatic genocide.
Those who use cyanide to fish are putting themselves into an incredibly health-risky environment. Exposure to small amounts of cyanide via any method of absorption will cause strong discomfort, including nausea, weakness, and headache. But exposure to large amounts leads to convulsions, loss of consciousness, and perhaps even lung failure, leading to death. Those who do survive are often prone to develop heart, brain, or nerve damage. Economically, though, poison fishing yields a brief benefit, but the destruction of the food chains and slow degradation of the habitats where the fish live eventually leads to a very negative outlook for fisheries in the tropics.
A brief public service announcement.
Cyanide is also used in cigarettes. Thusly, those who smoke are killing themselves with a chemical whose sole purpose is to destroy. Don't smoke, kids.
Hello there. Oh, Renee, you just shut it down.
Those who use cyanide to fish are putting themselves in harm's way.
Oh, hello there. Would you like to learn something about cyanide fishing? Cyanide? Okay, Renee. Yeah, you...
provides enough to satisfy every man's needs, but not every man's greed. Mahatma Gandhi. Every spirit builds itself a house, and beyond its house a world, and beyond its world a heaven. Know then that the world exists for you. For you is the phenomenon perfect. What we are, that only can we see. All that Adam had, all that Caesar could, you have and can do. Adam called his house heaven and earth. Caesar called his house Rome. You perhaps call yours a cobbler's trade, 100 acres of plowed land, or a scholar's garret. Yet line for line and point for point, your dominion is as great as theirs, though without fine names. Build therefore your own world. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Logging is the major cause of the degradation of the peat swamp forests in Indonesia. Some of the local people logged illegally because they did not see an economic alternative. Authorities lacked capacity to stop them. This former illegal logger explains.
Nah, karena waktu dulu itu ya tahun 1997 itu krisis moneter yang luar biasa untuk Indonesia, dan saya juga punya ada usaha lain yang jauh dari penebangan, dan sementara saya juga tidak bisa kemana-mana. Akhirnya saya cuma ikut bertahan saja.
But the project introduced new economic alternatives to the local communities. Commercial crops that can even thrive in the harsh conditions of the dried up peatland.
So you see, this soil is still very dry. We can plant like trees and so on, which still adaptable with this kind of dry situation. Special seed like a blangiran, jelutung and so on. So this kind of species are very adaptable in the little bit dry condition. Yeah, this is a blangiran. So major function of this wood is as a wood material for building. Yeah. And this, we call this jelutung, where people can take rubbers of it or latex of it, and this jelutung is a base material for chewing gum.
The local people are trained in agricultural techniques.
Dari proyek ini, kami lebih banyak belajar terutama dari tanaman yang dicoba dikembangkan di sini. Dari di mana tanam-tanam yang cocok untuk di sini ternyata dari tumbuhan sekitar sini, tidak bisa ditransfer dari luar wilayah sini. Jadi berarti tumbuh-tumbuhan endemis yang ada di sini.
Jelutung ini kita bisa menghasilkan bikin permen atau karet. Itu nanti kalau sudah besar kita mengekspornya mungkin ke daerah Mantangkai mungkin kan, dan lain-lainnya. Itu aja.
Since massive logging is no longer tolerated, the project supports local authorities to protect the areas where the forests are being restored.
Kalau untuk pengamatan kita masing-masing petugas sudah diberi pelatihan. Kalau masalah kebakaran kita sudah ada pelatihan RPK, Regu Pemadam Kebakaran. Untuk illegal logging kita juga punya anggota polisi kehutanan.
I think the illegal logging is significantly decreased in the Sebagan National Park because of the guard and because we manage the forest and manage the national park, and also because we work together with the local people.
Nah, jadi sekarang saya ini selain punya ada kebun sedikit lah, kebun karet ya itu. Terus lagi saya ikut di program konservasi mawas mulai tahun 2003 sampai sekarang.
This used to be one of the many settlements where illegal loggers did their job. But when massive logging was prohibited, it rapidly changed into a ghost town.
They took the logs from the forest and then they brought the logs near the river. From the river, all the logs are transported to the town. Sometimes hundreds of logs are transported from this river.
Bukannya banyak lagi, hampir semua. Tapi sekarang insaf. Orang-orangnya ini sudah percaya dengan bilangan-bilangan dari CARE dan dari pemerintah setempat di sini. Semua orang itu sudah tidak mau lagi kerja tebang hutan.
So things changed for the people in the project areas. Logging is more and more restricted, and more people live from the alternatives provided by the project. This is a promising development, but in other parts of Indonesia, illegal logging remains a problem.
Nah, kalau itu saya belum tahu pasti, yang jelas masih ada lah illegal logging. Itu pun juga karena tidak ada pekerjaan lain. Andai kata ada pekerjaan lain, mungkin mereka tidak lagi memilih illegal logging.
What we have done at the moment actually just 0.5% of the total degraded peatland probably in Central Kalimantan, also in Indonesia. So still long way to go.
Power plants are the largest single source of carbon pollution in the United States. Reducing carbon pollution from power plants will save lives and improve health. These culprits are all currently spewing into the air we breathe. Here's why it's so important to reduce power plant pollution. Carbon pollution traps heat in our air, raising the Earth's temperature. Warmer temperatures help create ozone smog, which can cause shortness of breath, wheezing, and coughing, and can worsen asthma and other lung diseases. This can land people in the hospital and even result in premature death. Rising temperatures from heat-trapping carbon pollution can also lead to droughts and increased risk of wildfires, threatening homes, food, and water supplies. And that's not all you get from power plants. There's also particle pollution, known as soot. This form of air pollution causes heart attacks and strokes and even increases the risk of early death. Sadly, the list keeps going. Mercury can lead to developmental birth defects, and nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide trigger asthma attacks and increase the risk of hospital and ER visits. These pollutants already affect the lives of millions of Americans. Reducing pollution from power plants will improve health and save lives. To learn more, visit the American Lung Association.
This is the story of 3 plastic bottles, empty and discarded. Their journeys are about to diverge, with outcomes that impact nothing less than the fate of the planet. But they weren't always this way. To understand where these bottles end up, we must first explore their origins. The heroes of our story were conceived in this oil refinery. The plastic in their bodies was formed by chemically bonding oil and gas molecules together to make monomers. In turn, these monomers were bonded into long polymer chains to make plastic, in the form of millions of pellets. Those were melted at manufacturing plants and reformed in molds to create the resilient material that makes up the triplets' bodies. Machines filled the bottles with sweet, bubbly liquid, and they were then wrapped, shipped, bought, opened, consumed, and unceremoniously discarded. And now here they lie, poised at the edge of the unknown. Bottle 1, like hundreds of millions of tons of his plastic brethren, ends up in a landfill. This huge dump expands each day as more trash comes in and continues to take up space. As plastics sit there being compressed amongst layers of other junk, rainwater flows through the waste and absorbs the water-soluble compounds it contains, and some of those are highly toxic. Together, they create a harmful stew called leachate, which can move into groundwater, soil, and streams, poisoning ecosystems and harming wildlife. It can take bottle 1 an agonizing 1,000 years to decompose. Bottle 2's journey is stranger, but unfortunately no happier. He floats on a trickle that reaches a stream that flows into a river, and a river that reaches the ocean. After months lost at sea, he's slowly drawn into a massive vortex where trash accumulates, a place known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Here, the ocean's currents have trapped millions of pieces of plastic debris. This is one of 5 plastic-filled gyres in the world's seas, places where the pollutants turn the water into a cloudy plastic soup. Some animals, like seabirds, get entangled in the mess. They and others mistake the brightly colored plastic bits for food. Plastic makes them feel full when they're not, so they starve to death and pass the toxins from the plastic up the food chain. For example, it's eaten by lanternfish. The lanternfish are eaten by squid. The squid are eaten by tuna. And the tuna are eaten by us. And most plastics don't biodegrade, which means they're destined to break down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics, which might rotate in the sea eternally. But Bottle 3 is spared the cruel purgatories of his brothers. A truck brings him to a plant where he and his companions are squeezed flat and compressed into a block. Okay, this sounds pretty bad too, but hang in there, it gets better. The blocks are shredded into tiny pieces, which are washed and melted so they become the raw materials that can be used again. As if by magic, Bottle 3 is now ready to be reborn as something completely new. For this bit of plastic with such humble origins, suddenly, the sky is the limit.
Fun fact, planet Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Mankind, about 140,000 years old. Let me put that in perspective. If you condense the Earth's lifespan into 24 hours, that's one full day, then we have been here on this planet for, drum roll please, 3 seconds. 3 seconds. And look what we've done. We have modestly named ourselves Homo sapiens, meaning wise man. But is man really so wise? Smart, yes, and it's good to be smart, but not too smart for your own good. Yes, we have split the atom. Yes, we build clever machines that navigate the universe in search of new homes, but at the same time, those atoms we split created nuclear warfare. In our quest to explore the galaxy, rejects and neglects the home that we have here now, so no, that cannot be wisdom. Wisdom is different. While intelligence speaks, wisdom listens, and we willingly covered our ears to Mother Nature's screams and closed our eyes to all of her help-wanted signs. Wisdom knows that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so if we were wise, we would not be shocked when we see storms that are stronger than ever before, or more drought, hurricanes, and wildfire than ever before, because there's more pollution than ever before, more carbon, more trees cut down than ever before. At a record pace, we have increased the extinction of animals by 1,000 times the normal rate. What a feat. In the next 10 to 100 years, every beloved animal character in every children's book is predicted to go extinct. Lions gone, rhinos gone, tiger, gorilla, elephant, polar bear gone. In 3 seconds. Species that have been here longer than us will be gone because of us. In this 3 seconds. In an existence shorter than a Vine video, we turn the circle of life into our own personal conveyor belt. Somebody, anybody help. We were given so much, the only planet in this solar system with life. I mean, we are 1 in a million. No, actually, scientifically, we are 1 in a billion, trillion. That's a 1 followed by 33 zeros. And I don't want to get too spiritual, but how are we not a miracle? We are perfectly positioned to the sun so we don't burn, but not too distant so we don't turn to ice. Goldilocks said it best, we are just right. This paradise where we are given medicine from trees, not coincidentally, but because like the song says, we are family. Literally, everything, every species is connected genetically, from the sunflower to the sunfish. And this is what we must recognize before it's too late, because the real crisis is not global warming, environmental destruction, or animal agriculture. It is us. These problems are symptoms of us, byproducts of us. Our inner reflection, loss of connection has created this misdirection. We have forgotten that everything contributes to the perfection of Mother Nature. Corporations keep us unaware and disconnected, but they have underestimated our strength. Contrary to popular belief, millions are waking up out of their sleep, seeing our home being taken right up under our feet. We cannot allow our history to be written by the wicked, greedy, and loony. It is our duty to protect Mother Nature from those who refuse to see her beauty. Call me crazy, but I believe we should have the right to eat food that's safe, with ingredients we can pronounce. Drink water that is clean, marvel at trees, breathe air free of toxins. These are natural rights, not things that can be bargained for in Congress. See, they want you to feel powerless, but it has been said that something as small as the flutter of a butterfly's wing can cause a typhoon halfway around the world. Well, when enough people come together, we too will make waves and wash the world into a new era filled with love and connection, freedom for all without oppression. But it is up to you, yes, you watching this behind this screen, to make the effort, because time is of the essence, and only together can we make it to the 4th second. We can no longer rely on those who have polluted our air, water, and sea for a solution. There will be no Iron Man coming with a super technological fix to save the world. In fact, we cannot save the world, but we can recreate the world. We must do something about our trees. Trees are so important to this planet. Destroying them is causing more than 7 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year. If we don't stop the destruction of the world's forests, we will not be able to solve climate change, period. For the past year, I've been supporting Stand for Trees, a platform that puts the power of change back into the hands of the people. They allow you to take responsibility for your carbon footprint and directly protect the threatened forests, forest communities, and wildlife of the world. If millions of us support Stand for Trees right now, we could actually do something about climate change and environmental destruction. Only through the collective actions of us all will we have a future full of forests that are full of life, and a planet that is full of harmony. Please join me and go to standfortrees.org to save a forest and to save our future.